Well, today we're going to be talking about the Blazar Remus 1.5 lenses. Now, I've got the box set that first came out, which includes the 45mm, which I have on the camera at the moment, and I have it at T-stop 2.8, so it's not wide open. And also the 65, if you can see that here, I've got the 65 as well. And then there's the 100mm. The 100mm is right here. Now, this video is about should you buy the Blazar Remus lenses, the 1.5 versions, because they're very popular at the moment. They're getting a lot of media coverage by a lot of YouTubers and also by me, who's another YouTuber. And they give a bit of a different look. They give an anamorphic look, and especially around the edges here, they give a kind of compressed, you can kind of see, if you look at my hand, it gets skinnier as it comes towards the center. So what's happening with the lenses is they're portraying a two-factor width in a 1.5, so they're compressing the edges. So that's something you need to be aware of. But what we're going to look at today is for general use. Like for general use, we're not going to deep dive and look at chromatic aberration and all the very technical stuff. We're just going to look at, like, are these lenses usable? Because a lot of people ask, are they sharp and are they soft and all this sort of stuff? And there's a lot of complex answers around those questions. So if you're going to be using them for, say, YouTube or just making online stuff like Cam Mackey does, like on I don't know if you know Cam Mackey, he's a big supporter of these lenses. If you're going to be making stuff like him that's going to primarily be on social media, then these lenses are by far good enough. It's only if you probably were trying to make a film that is going to be on a huge screen that maybe the imperfections of them start to come out. Now, what we need to keep in our minds, that these lenses here really work out to be about the price of a medium zoom lens or a kind of better than average prime lens. They're not priced at what you would expect to get from the main manufacturers like Nikon, Sony, Leica, all them sort of things with the red rings that have really good characteristics in the lens. They're really sharp and they have a really nice fall off, and spherical lenses, because anamorphic lenses historically have been extremely expensive. And this allows the average person, the average YouTuber, the average person who wants to play around and make some sort of content and film, getting into the anamorphic look. So first of all, what we need to look at is, are these anamorphic lens sharps? Now, the reality is they are sharp. Now, I've got this at 2.8 and I'm not got any autofocus on it. I've just set it. And this distance you're looking at now, to me, is around about minimal focus. I'm filming it at minimum focus. So if you want something that is going to be to do for detailed stuff, where close up, the lenses as they are out of the box will not fit that criteria. You would need to have to put some sort of magnifying glass or diopter or something on the front to get closer. So that's one thing you need to consider. If you're buying these lenses, that the minimal focus distance is not that great. So as you can see, I'm just talking head. I'm on the 45, the widest lens, and if I went to a 65 or the 100, I'd have to move back. I could not be sitting where I am now and have that minimal focus. So that's the first thing you need to consider. Minimal focus is a bit of an issue. Now, when we talk about focus, what I've seen some people online saying that they're soft, but in reality, I've done tests, and if you look on my YouTube channel, you go and search there. I've done some tests where I've checked out all of the focus on these lenses, and I have to say, they're not a premium lens, but the focus is as good as your normal lenses you have on your normal cameras. So if you went out and bought, say, like a 50mm Canon Nifty 50 sort of thing, or 35mm, they're not a red ring. These lenses are really they're close, they're competitive, they have good focus. Because they're manual focus, especially if you want to shoot them wide open, the focus plane is quite small and it's quite hard to get them spot on. So it is a little bit tricky. Now, as I'm moving in and out, the focus point is staying the same, but I'm moving because I haven't got any autofocus settings on them. There is a LiDAR system. I have used that, and that works pretty well. But at the moment, I've just got it locked off, and it's focusing. But when they are in focus, the plain focus, the eyes are nice and crisp and sharp. You can see all the details on the glasses. The focus on them is good. The only criticism I would have about the focus is this one here, which is the 100mm. Now, the 100mm is still pretty sharp. And remember, its minimal aperture is 2.8. So if you stop it down to about 3.2 or something like that, it does come a little bit better into focus. And that one there, what makes it look like it's softer than it actually is it blooms considerably. And that's probably the biggest criticism I'll have of the three. The negative on the 100mm is that if you have anything like fog or mist or anything like you're shooting, maybe if you're a forest in the morning where there's a lot of dew in the air, the blooming tends to make that mist in the air become more opaque, and it just looks like a blob in the photo. So if you're shooting that type of stuff and you want to use the 100mm, then you may be disappointed. So that's the biggest negative. But as far as sharpness goes, it's still very usable, and it's fine, especially if you stop it down. At 2.8, yeah, that's probably the softest of the lens. If you stop it down a little bit, you've still got the telephoto effect, so you can still kind of get that waterfall effect in the background that you're seeing here in this lens. And it's more predominant because obviously it's a more telephoto lens. So that's just something you need to be aware of with the 100mm. It still gives a beautiful look, but in some circumstances I've found that it has some limitations. The other two don't seem to bloom as much. So that is something to consider if you're looking at the Blazar Remus lenses. Now, some people are going on about chromatic aberration and these sorts of things. Now, you've got to understand these are a kind of an anamorphic lens that's been made to make it look like they have a wider look. Now, what I normally do is when I put them into YouTube or make my video, I do take off a little bit of the edge. I don't use the whole width of the lens, so I cut a little bit out of the video on each side. So, it's like as if I'm cutting it off here, but obviously you can see that I've cut a bit off the ends. What you're seeing in this video has been trimmed slightly. So I'm taking a little bit of that high distortion out of the video. And you can do that as well. If you think that when you go towards the edge, the distortion is a little bit too much, you can trim that off to take that away. Now, if I move here towards the edge of the screen, you can see that my head becomes a little bit more squashed, a little bit more distorted. So if you're using it in an application where you are going to have a lot of the subjects towards the edge of the video, you need to be a little bit careful. If they're walking in, it's fine. I've done like videos where you have people walking in. That kind of doesn't look too bad. But if you want to have the person standing there at the edge where it's obvious that there's distortion, people can see, are watching it for some time and see the distortion, these lenses may not be a good fit for that sort of application. So that's something else you need to consider. Now, the reason why you would buy these lenses. Now, the reason why you buy these lenses is because they're not perfect. They have imperfections. They don't have that real clinical look. The out of focus areas look a bit different. The foreground focus, if it's out of focus, looks a bit different. It has a bit of a different look. Even if you crop, you don't use the full anamorphic width. It gives a different feel to the lens. And of course also you get the anamorphic flaring as well, which can be nice. You may like that, you may not like that. So that's something you need to consider as well. I will say, but I've got this flaring quite well in this video just for demonstrative purposes, but they do take quite a strong light. I've got this light in the background quite strong, but if I turn that down, it almost goes from amber to white and becomes a lot fainter. So it depends on the source of the light. they don't flare as easy as you may think. You need to be quite, distinct or set to get it to, you need to have that light and you need to look right into it and you need to have the light strong to get the flares. So if you're not a fan of the flares, unless you put it right into the light, you're not going to get them. So that's another thing that I think some people are a little bit negative towards the flares, but these don't flare that well. So that's the second thing. Now, why I bought them is because I like the look. And the more I start getting used to using them and shooting off, I could just shoot off a monopod usually with them, and so I can manual focus them. The way I'm using them currently is I'm not using anything fancy at all. I'm not even using a external display to look at them and keep them in focus. All I do is I'm shooting on an R3, Canon R3, and I'm viewing the picture in the compressed mode, as you would normally see it in the camera. I have no decompression on my screen of my camera. And what I do is I just hit the magnify button before I start recording, and I'm magnifying, then I'll focus on whatever I want to be in focus. So I checked it, it's actually really good in focus. Then I start recording and I frame it with it squeezed, and then I just stop the video. So I'm using very, very simple setup. I'm just using a monopod, the camera, and the lens. And these lenses are EF with an adapter to RF on the EOS R3. So if you're thinking that you're going to need to have some really complex setup to shoot with these lenses, you don't. Obviously, if I'm just zooming in and focusing on one thing, the pull focus obviously is a little bit tricky, but even though you can pull focus, usually when the focus is changing, people aren't so critical about focus being spot on. So what I could do is I could start the focus on one object, and then as I'm changing the focus, just watch the second object until it looks like it's pretty close coming into focus, and then stop the video. And that seems to work quite well. It's quite useful, especially if, as I said, if you're going to use it on social media. Maybe if you wanted something a little bit better for if you was making a film or something, you might need to then go to a more elaborate setup. But my point is you can get good quality footage that's sharp enough, and I'll say that sharp enough. I mean, it's not the sharpest, but I actually don't like video that's too sharp. It kind of, to me, looks a bit crunchy, a bit too crunchy. So I actually liking these lenses. They have a more softer look to them in general, but they're not soft. I mean, people say they're soft. I wouldn't really call them soft. I don't think they're that bad. I would call them probably, they're not sharp, but they're about the same sharpness as I said, a mid-tier lens, which is what you pay for them. So these work out about a little bit over $1,000 US each, maybe about $1,200, something around there, maybe $1,200, $1,300 US. And at that price point, I think these are amazing value. And if you take away the fact that you're comparing them with a traditional spherical lens that you have for your photography cameras or your cine lenses that are primes, and you take that away and you look at just these normal lenses, these normal zoom lens, or a mediocre prime lens, they are as good as them. They're as good as the lenses that are coming from these top companies. And that's what you need to consider. And that's good enough. On the small screen, that to me is fine. It looks fine. You can even add a bit of sharpening. They crisp up, really nice. So guys, that's where I'm going to leave the video. So I hope I've answered your question. Should you buy the Blazar Remus lenses? And my answer is yes, but you need to consider the limitations. And for your use case, if it's going to be that if you're off at the side of the screen like this, and you're shooting a lot like that, then you may want to consider that when you buy them. And the other thing as well is, remember, you can always shoot with them in a crop sensor. And of course, a lot of that roll off or that distortion towards the end of the lens will be cropped out and they'll look a lot cleaner. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave the video. I hope that really has given you kind of the information that you would like to have when you're looking at these lenses. But if you want something with a bit of character that's a really good value, you just can't beat these lenses. They look amazing. Okay, guys, I'll see you next video. Catch you out.